This exhibition is about a man whose name is Hussein. Here are a few famous quotes from people who have said something about Hussein. So we have Mahatma Gandhi, we have Imam Khomeini, we have Thomas Kite, and we have Sarojini Maidu. So maybe I can go through one. Let's say this woman. She said, "I congratulate Muslims that from among them Hussein, a great human being, was born. It's revered and honored totally by all communities." So Hussein was a man who stood up for justice and he stood against oppression. This is the family tree of Hussein. So his lineage goes all the way from Adam, who was the first of creation, and in his family tree includes many of the major world prophets, such as Jesus, Moses, and we have Abraham here. So Imam Hussain shared the same message as all these prophets, and that was the message of justice and to stand against oppression.
Okay, so now we have entered Medina, which is the second most sacred, holiest city in Saudi Arabia for Islam as well. And as we can see, a 3D model of the Holy Prophet's Mosque, which is called Masjid Nabawi. It's very holy to us, and we hold the same importance to it as the Holy Kaaba as well. And opposite Masjid Nabawi, which is the Prophet's Mosque, we have Jannatul Baqi, which is a cemetery, one of the largest Muslim cemeteries, where we have the grandson. And over here we have Jannatul Baqi, which is the cemetery of Baqi. Baqi is its name, where the Holy Prophet is buried along with his descendants. So we have Hassan, his grandson, and we also have Muhammad, who is Hassan's grandson as well. So it is present day located just right behind Masjid Nabawi. And it's not only the Prophet and his family who are buried here, there's very many companions who are also buried here. And now we can move towards Makkah.
During Imam Hassan's time, there were some disagreements between him and the ruler, so they made a peace treaty. So these are the conditions of the peace treaty that they made. And according to the peace treaty, after the ruler would pass on, the caliphate would go back to Imam Hassan. But instead of Imam Hassan was poisoned during that time, and instead of the caliphate going back to Imam Hassan's brother, it went on to the ruler's son. So the ruler's son Yazid was an oppressive tyrant. He did everything that was not permitted in Islam. So immediately Yazid came into power, he demanded allegiance from Hussein. Imam Hussain refused to give allegiance to a man like Yazid, and he planned to attack him while he was in Medina. So Imam Hussain, to protect the sanctity of Medina, didn't want bloodshed in Medina. So he went towards Mecca, as it was the season of Hajj anyways. So he proceeded towards Mecca. Okay. So the Kaaba was built by Nabii Ibrahim, and it is known that the Kaaba is a place for amnesty for all. So whoever is near the Kaaba will not be harmed. So it was Hajj season, and Imam Hussain came to Mecca to do Hajj. But when he arrived at the Kaaba, he was informed that Yazid had already sent his army to assassinate him, even if he was next to the Kaaba. But to prevent bloodshed near the Kaaba and to protect the security of the people around the Kaaba, Imam Hussain went towards Kufa. The reason he went towards Kufa was because he had received thousands of letters from Kufa for him to go over there, and they wanted to meet him. So he decided to make his way to Kufa. Before Imam arrived to Kufa, he was stopped by a general in Yazid's army whose name was Hur. Imam realized that Hur's army was thirsty and hungry, so he gave his whole army water and food, and Imam intercepted his way to Karbala.
So when Hur had intercepted Hussein's caravan, he proceeded towards Hind, which is present-day India. Now, on the way to Hind, he came across a place, Nainawa, which is present-day Karbala, and he pitched his tents at this point as a resting place. So when he pitched his tents here, Yazid's army, they got to know that Hussein has now pitched his tents here, and he started sending his army, because he figured that if he sent an army, it would cause a scare in Hussein, and Hussein would eventually give in and plead allegiance to him. But Hussein, even at this point, when he saw that there's people coming, thousands of hundreds of people coming and pitching their tents right across him, he didn't falter, and he still stood for what he believed in. So now we see that it's the first month of the Islamic calendar, which is Muharram, and Yazid is still sending armies upon armies to scare Hussein. But Hussein obviously did not falter. So Hussein had initially pitched his tents near the river of Euphrates, which we call Furat, and Yazid's army, when they came, they made sure that they moved Hussein backwards, and so Hussein had no supply of the river Euphrates because he was moved behind. On the 7th day of Muharram, the Islamic month, Yazid's army had cut off the water supply from the Euphrates, and therefore Hussein and his family, his caravan, did not have access to something as basic as water. So they went on for 3 days without water, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, and on the 10th is where the tragedy unfolded. So when we come towards the 10th day, this is a very important day in the history of Karbala, because this is where Hussein, his companions, his family, his children, they all gave up their lives, not for the sake of Islam alone, but to make a stand against an oppressor. And we can see that until the very end, Hussein's aim wasn't to come and fight. It wasn't to cause bloodshed. It wasn't to come and cause a rebellion. His main purpose of everything that he did was to stand up against an oppressor. And when it came to the fact that he had to give in his life, that's what he did, because it was his last resort. So the 10th day started with the adhan, which is the call to prayer. And this is very important because the son of Hussein, Ali Akbar, the greater Akbar, gave the adhan. And this son of his was very similar looking to the Prophet. He had all the Prophet's features. And when he said the adhan, it moved so many people in the army because they were reminded of the Holy Prophet. Remember, this is the family of the Holy Prophet that we're talking about over here. And these are people who know this, yet they still stood their ground with an oppressive ruler. So on the 10th day, the battle had to ensue, and we can see that the family, the companions of Hussein, had now made their stand, and they were willing to give in their life for this cause. We have so many companions, and amongst them we have Hur, the very same Hur who had stood here and intercepted Hussein from going into Kufa. Hur is one person who had to make a choice between right and wrong. And when the 10th day came, he realized that Hussein is who he wants to be with. Hussein is the right he wants to be with, as opposed to the wrong of Yazid. And on that day, he made a decision that he would join Hussein. This shows us that until the very end, we have the power to make a stand. We have the power to say that this is wrong and this is right. And we have the power within ourselves to make a choice, just the way Hur did. And Hur was one of the very first people who sacrificed his life for this cause. Then we have people like Zuhair and Habib ibn Mazahir and Burair. These are mere companions, but they saw that this is the stand Hussein is taking, and he will not take it alone. And this is where, when we come and we say that there's so many other people doing so many things for Palestine, for Kashmir, for Syria, we don't need to do anything. But here we are, having the power. Every little thing we do can make a very big difference. Hussein had an army of a mere 72, as opposed to 30,000 that Yazid had sent. Yet none of them gave hope, and none of them said that, oh, we're going to lose and we don't need to be here. They all gave in the most they could. And so, as fighting ensued, it's Arab customs that you fight one-on-one. But Yazid, his army broke the customs, and they all started attacking Hussein's army all at once. But Hussein stuck to his customs, and he sent everyone one by one. And we know that even though they fought with such strength and courage, they still were overpowered by all these thousands of people. And yet, when each and every companion was being killed, the rest didn't falter. The rest saw that this is my fate, and they met it, regardless of what would happen to them. And so the companions, one by one, they were being killed, they were being massacred, they were being martyred. No one lost hope, and no one said that they wouldn't fight for Islam anymore. And so the companions went, and it came the time for Hussein's family. Hussein's son Ali Akbar, Ali the Great, he went first. He was a very young man, but he sacrificed his life. We have Hussein's nephews, Hussein's sister Zainab, the children, Aun and Muhammad, 11 and 12 years old. These are children who we know right now are supposed to be playing things like football. They go to school, they're so very innocent, you wouldn't ever imagine these children being on a battlefield. Yet here they are, giving their life for the cause of Islam, for the cause of standing against oppression. Qasim, the nephew of Hussein, the son of Hassan, gave his life. And one by one, Hussein's family also gave away their lives. The children were so thirsty that they called Abbas, Hussein's brother, to bring them water. Abbas had decided that he will go to the river of Euphrates amongst these thousands of people and bring some water, not for them, but for the children who were denied access to water as well. This is where we say that Yazid had not one drop of humanity in him. That if he has a problem with Hussein, he tackles it with Hussein and Hussein alone. But no, even Hussein's children had to suffer because of what Yazid wanted. And so when we see that Abbas, when he went to get water, his intention wasn't to fight under any circumstance. He even said that he's leaving his sword behind because he is going to bring water not for them but for the children. Yet when he went towards the river, the army of Yazid decided that no, he's not going to have a sip of water and he's not going to take back a drop of water to the camp. And they cut off his hands one by one because he was holding the water filter. One by one they cut his hands, but he decided that no, this water had to reach the camp. He held the water with his mouth. They pierced his eyes with arrows so that he couldn't see where he was going. And eventually he wasn't in a position to fight, and he was killed right then and there. This shows us that the water, no matter what happened, couldn't reach the camp. They were willing to go to such extents to make sure that water doesn't reach them. And now we come to a very small 6-month-old baby, and we know that a 6-month-old child, in all its innocence, is so small. Hussein's 6-month-old baby, Ali Asghar, the smaller Asghar, Hussein realized that if they couldn't give water to us, to the 6-year-old children, they wouldn't deny Ali Asghar, the 6-month-old baby, from getting water. This baby was crying and crying and crying. There is no food, there is no water, there is no milk. Hussein thought that these people would have the least bit of humanity and give this small baby water. But that was not the case. When Hussein took his child towards the land, towards the army, they shot a 3-pronged arrow at the child. This is the extent to which we can see that Yazid's army had no bit of humanity. A very small baby, a child who just wants water. It has done nothing to you. Yet, here you are, in response to giving it water, you give it an arrow. And that is where Hussein had lost each and every one of his family members, except for Sajjad, who was his son, who was ailing and very ill and could not fight. And in Islam, you're sick, you do not fight. And Hussein had stood his ground that even though Sajjad wanted to sacrifice his life, Hussein had told him that no, you are not coming. And we know that now we can see that from Sajjad is where Hussein's lineage was carried. And now it was only Hussein and Hussein alone who was remained from the whole army. And he knew that his time was coming, and he went and he fought as bravely as he could. Before he mounted his horse, his 4-year-old daughter Sakina, she begged him not to go. She cried that, "Oh father, if you go, who will take care of me?" Because she saw the situation that they were all in. And she knew that if she had no father, she wouldn't be able to survive. But yet Hussein, he had to make his stand. Despite his family, despite his wife, despite his sisters telling him not to go, he knew that this is what he had to do in order to save Islam and to stand against an oppressive ruler. And so he went to the battlefield, he fought as bravely as he could, and eventually he was overcome and he was killed. And then we come towards the time where on the evening of that day, the army came, and the people that Hussein had buried, they dug up their graves. They made sure that each and every one of them was out, and they decapitated all their heads to parade around in spears. These are people, you have killed people already, yet here you are wanting to make the wounds a lot worse. And so on the evening, the ladies, bear in mind that there is no man except an ailing Sajjad. And so the army came towards the tents of Hussein and they started looting them. They started burning their tents. They started snatching their veils. They started whipping and lashing. And bear in mind, these are only women and children and an ailing Sajjad. And therefore on the next day, when Zainab, Hussein's sister, had now come to the realization that she is the one who has to lead this caravan, where when they had come with a whole army of men, and now they are leaving just by themselves and an Imam Sajjad. And so on that day, the caravan was now to proceed towards Kufa, where they would be paraded throughout the streets and would be taken to the palace, the court palace. So these are the tents of Hussein, his family and his companions. They are in this condition because we wanted to demonstrate and portray that how after the tragedy and massacre happened, the tents were burnt, and this is the condition that the Prophet's family was left in. And here we have the horse, the white horse of Hussein, who was Zuljana, who when he went into the battlefield had a man on him, and when he returned with no man. Here we have the army of Yazid. Yazid kept sending men one by one until the 10th day, until the army amounted to a total of 30,000 people. 30,000 people fighting an army of only 72 men. And you can see how they were progressing towards the tent, whereas in Arab customs. So here we have the river Euphrates, which as we know still runs, and this is the only source of water that was on this land. And on the 7th day, Hussein had no connection or supply from the water. The army had cut their water supply. And right next to the river, we have the tents of Yazid's army. So many people. We have all these soldiers that were here ready to fight, a small army of 72. And this shows us that Yazid was so willing to show his power that he kept sending men and sending men and sending men to fight this very small army that was not even very necessary. And these were men who had no guilt in their heart when it came to saying the fact that they're going to kill Hussein and his family.
So this is Kufa. This is the same place where Hussein's army was refused to enter before. But now, after Hussein being killed at Karbala, his family was paraded through the streets of Kufa. They were thrown things at, they were throwing shoes at, and then they were taken to the palace of the governor at that time. In the palace of the governor, Bibi Zainab, being the alone woman, she had to speak in a whole group of many men. Imam Sajjad was sick and hence he could not stand up, but Bibi Zainab had to go and speak in the palace of Kufa, where the governor was. So after they were confirmed their victory at Kufa, they were sent to Damascus to confirm the victory with Yazid. So on the way to Damascus, where the headquarters of Yazid was located, they stopped at a place known as Aleppo to relax. At Aleppo, there was a church where this monk was standing, and when the caravan arrived, he went to inquire what had happened to the caravan. When he heard the tragic event of the caravan, he wanted to keep the head of Hussein for the night, which was on spears, but then the opposition refused. So he had collected 10,000 dirhams over a long period of time, which he gave in exchange of keeping the head for the night. In the morning, he returned the head, and the caravan left for Sham.
So now we have entered Sham, which is the headquarters of Yazid. So this is where Yazid ruled from, and this is where he had made his orders from, and everyone else carried out from there. So here we have the bazaar, which is the street where there's many shops. There's a lot of activity, economic activity going on. And upon Yazid's orders, the bazaar was decorated in such a way that you would think that a very victorious activity has emerged. For Yazid, obviously, the killing of Hussein was a victory, because now he doesn't have anyone to stand up against him. He doesn't have anyone to tell the people that no, Yazid is wrong. But for us, we know that it isn't a victory, because now we have seen that Hussein has sacrificed his life, he has stood against oppression, but these people don't know what has happened. And this is where we have the role of Zainab, Hussein's sister, and the women and the children of Hussein's caravan, where we see that now it's upon Zainab and her family who are remaining, and the ailing Sajjad, to make sure that Hussein's story is brought out. The atrocities that Yazid came with are brought out. And so the bazaar was decorated very nicely, and upon Yazid's orders, the people in the bazaar, the people from their homes, were ordered to keep throwing stones, to keep throwing shoes, to keep throwing food at the family of the Holy Prophet as if they were beggars. And this is the family of the Holy Prophet we're talking about. They have such importance, they are so valuable, and yet when they come here, it's all just humility that they're being involved in. These people don't know that this is the Holy Prophet's family that they are throwing stones at, that they're treating like as if they were beggars, that they're humiliating. But once they got to know, it would cause an uprising. Everyone, young, old, male, female, was ordered to keep throwing stones, to keep throwing food, to keep throwing shoes at this holy family. So this is a depiction of the remaining family of Hussein, and as we can see, there are so many women and so many children and one man who is Sajjad. And we can see that when they were brought to the court of Yazid, it was upon them to make their stand clear. It was upon them to bring out the message that Hussein had sacrificed his life for. And these are people who have gone through emotional trauma, psychological trauma, and here they are having to replay the atrocities that had happened for the court. And Lady Zainab, with her eloquence, with her oratory power, had to make sure that Hussein's message came through to these people, to these ignorant, very ignorant and inhumane people. And the sermon that her and Imam Sajjad had made moved the court. These are people who are giving a sermon to a court of thousands of people, thousands of ambassadors, thousands of important people in Yazid's palace. And we can see that with Zainab's eloquence, with Zainab's oratory power, she put such a powerful message across, where she had to replay the atrocities. She had to say how her human rights were snatched. She had to say how she was whipped, how all the children were whipped, how her veils were snatched. She had to talk about how a 6-month-old baby was shot in the neck because of Yazid's inhumanity. She had to say how she saw her brother give his life away for the sake of standing against oppression. And as she progressed with her speech, as Sajjad progressed with her speech, the audience was being moved. And for Yazid, this was not a good sign. For Yazid, this is supposed to be a place where he can humiliate them as much as he wants. But yet here we have Zayman and Sajjad's sermon, which are jeopardizing his position, jeopardizing the victory that he had come across with. And so he decided that he needed to make sure that these people were not in contact with the rest of the city. And so he made sure that they were put in a dungeon. Yazid's vile and cruel nature was shown when Hussein's head was presented to him. And he treated that head with such disrespect. He kept poking Hussein's lips, and he kept laughing, and he kept telling the head that, look, I have overcome you, I have emerged victorious. This is a person who is expected to lead the Muslim nation, but this is how he is: an alcoholic, a drunkard, an extravagant person with no respect for men, women, children, all alike. So this is a very small dungeon with limited air supply and a very small window that the family of Hussein was expected to survive. Women, children, and an ailing Sajjad all together.
لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا